card. See the REC?
Yep.
And see a little take count.
Workshops are always like church. Nobody's allowed to sit in the front. I need a volunteer. In fact, what's your name?
You pointed at me?
Yes.
No volunteer.
No. All you do, you're the sound monitor.
Oh,
If you
okay.
can't hear me, wave your hand.
Okay.
My wife's got a hearing loss, and so I'm sensitive to people not being able to hear when I'm speaking, especially on mic. And I don't think a mic would be necessary in this room, but wave if I need to speak up. Okay.
Well, you met Carolyn, one of our assistants. This is Jackie Chesser, one other assistant metro editor, and the pointing lady is Rebecca Morris, another one of our assistant metro editors. We just said we started at 8:45, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Our trainer today is Steve Buttry, who is writing coach and national correspondent for the Omaha World Herald. We've seen his stuff on the internet. We liked it. We've talked to him on the phone and over email, and we liked his ideas. And things fell together, and we had the opportunity to bring him into town today and to give 3 workshops. 2 this morning, 1 this afternoon. So we're really happy to have Steve with us. And Steve, show us yours.
Okay. Thanks. If you didn't get the handouts, you can get them on the way out. There's one handout for that I did for this workshop. There's also a handout for that came from Jack Hart of the Oregonian on kind of a lexicon of leads, words we can, terms we can use to describe the different kinds of leads we write. And then there's a handout from Dick Thien, who used to be at the University of Nebraska. I think he's with the Freedom Forum now, on cliche leads. Some of those feel uncomfortably like some leads that I've written at times, and you might see something familiar in there, but I don't know that any of them came from your paper. Dick put that together. And then there's a handout for the second workshop that's back there too. Also up here I've got handouts from other workshops that I've done in other places. I just bring the leftovers with me to the next stop, and so if you want to pick those up, I've got handouts for 4 different workshops up there that I've done other places. Today we're going to talk about writing a strong lead, though. Anybody ever had the experience of sitting at the keyboard, staring at the blank screen, waiting for the perfect lead to write itself? You show hands here. Okay, that's a familiar experience. My experience has been that it didn't write itself when I was staring at the blank screen. And so I want to talk about some techniques to help you write, if not the perfect lead, at least some stronger leads. To me, there's kind of three phases of writing a strong lead, and none of them involve staring at the blank screen. One of them is getting a strong focus before you sit down. It's understanding as you are working on the reporting and as you're thinking about the story when you're driving back from the interview and talking about it with your editor, is getting a strong focus on the story before you sit down to write. And we're talking about some techniques to come up with an idea for the lead. And we're going to talk about the third phase of the lead. First, I want to watch a movie briefly. Can everybody see this? Stand up if you can. Can everybody hear?
Things that the words to write for ourselves are always so much better than the words we write for others. Go ahead. Go ahead and what? Right. What are you doing? I'm writing. Let you be. When you start punching those keys. Is there a problem? No, I'm just thinking. No. No thinking. I'll come later. You write your first draft with your heart.
Okay, that's what we're going to be talking about is to write and to get going on the writing. Write that first draft, write with your heart. And then we're going to talk about rewriting. To me, a lot of the secret to writing a good lead is in the rewriting, is in being really demanding of yourself and of your copy as you rewrite. That you're going to come up with a better lead when you've got a lead there on the screen and you're working to perfect it than when you're staring at the blank screen. So that it's a lot more effective, I've found, to get something out there, to get started, and then come back and work on perfecting it, than to work and insist on getting that first paragraph perfect before you can go on to the second one. So those are the things we're going to talk about: keeping a strong focus, some techniques to get rolling with the lead, and then the rewriting of the lead. One of the things, and I do a whole workshop on this. In fact, I was trying to remember, I was counting the stacks back there. I'm thinking, okay, 5 handouts. What's the fifth one? Fifth handout is a handout for a workshop I'm not doing here. But I do a whole workshop on some storytelling techniques, and kind of the two primary things I talk about are the process and using story elements. And the process that I talk about, and I'm going to talk about it briefly here because it's helped in writing the leads, is to write as you report. That you go out on a story and come back, and you've got more work to do on it, but you sit down and write up from that interview or from that event or whatever, and get rolling and do that as you go. That's a helpful thing for writing the lead because it goes two things. First, it gets you started writing, but it also gets the strong focus going. You have to, writing helps you focus what you're doing. Okay? So the more you can write as you report, I think the stronger you're going to find out that your leads are. You're almost in a process of auditioning the lead, and as well as sharpening the focus while you work. The handout has a lot of ideas from some other writing coaches that I work with a lot online that I want to share with you that are helpful to get the focus before you even write, or if you're writing as you report, they'll help you focus when you're ready to put this jumble of stuff you've written in, organize it into a story. And I don't suggest that you do all of these on any story because they would kind of get redundant, but try some of them out and see which one works the best for you. Bruce De Silva of AP has a list of questions here that I think will help you decide what the focus of it is. Why do you want to write this story in the first place? Why do you care about this? What's new here? Those sorts of things. Jack Hart of the Oregonian, who did the handout on the lexicon of leads I've got back there, talks about coming up with a theme statement. Now, the theme statement isn't necessarily the lead, but early on in your reporting process, maybe even when you're pitching an idea to the editor or getting an assignment from the editor, which may be too early to have the right theme statement. The theme statement may change 2 or 3 times as you're discovering the facts and knocking down your preconceived notions or your editor's preconceived notions and finding out what the story really is. But Jack advises having a theme statement of about 6 words, 6-word sentence that captures the essence of the story. It may, like I said, it may become your lead. It may become your nut graph. It may not even be part of the story. Maybe be the headline. It may not be there at all, but it will help you focus the story to boil it down to its essence. Bill Leaning of the Kansas City Star goes even tighter than Jack. Jack says, 6 to 8 words, short, brief sentence. Bill Leaning likes a 3-word sentence. Subject, verb, object. In fact, he even thinks that same technique can you can break down the main points of your story into 3-word sentences. He uses the story of the Pied Piper as an illustration. Sorry, when you come in late, you got some. No. So he tells the story of the Pied Piper in these 3-word sentences. Rats overrun city, City hires Ratman. Ratman kills rats. City stiffs Ratman. Ratman steals children. Moral, keep your word, or flutists kick butt. But that simple technique of deciding, okay, what's the subject here? You have to decide, okay, who's doing the action? That's an important part of deciding what your lead is, what your focus of the story is who's doing the action. You need a strong verb, which you're going to want in your lead too. We'll talk about that a lot later. And you need an object, who's the action being done to. But so that process of thinking, okay, what are those three elements is going to help focus your story. De Silva has another test that I think he stole from somebody else, and I think I've got it attributed here. Henry McNulty of the Hartford Current is when he stole from. That he calls the bus stop test. Let's say you're passing, I don't know, do you have buses here? Okay, you're at a corner, guy in a bus shouts out the window, "What's your story about?" And the bus is pulling away. You got about 2 seconds to tell someone what's your story about. That answer will help you focus that story. Now, nobody's calling out to you out of bus windows. Maybe if you stop by your editor's desk and tell your editor in 2 or 3 seconds what your story is about, that will help you focus. If your editor's too busy, tell your colleague next, in the cubicle next to you what your story is about. De Silva also suggests writing a headline for the story. Now, hopefully the copy desk can write a better headline, but if you really like it, you can suggest it to the copy desk. But writing a headline helps you identify, writing a headline before you do the story will help you identify that focus. And then, whichever one of these techniques that you're using, if you go, and De Silva stresses not a bad headline, unit moles probe, but we don't want that. Write a strong headline for your story. But if you've got the headline, if you've got the theme statement, if you told the editor or the person at the bus stop what the story was about, when you're finished with your lead or when you're finished with your story, go back and see, did I follow that? Did I keep that focus? So the mental process of deciding what your story about is the first part of writing a strong lead. Keep that strong focus and determine what the focus is. And then, of course, you have to do the writing. And there are a lot of techniques that I'm going to give you here. And again, you don't necessarily want to use them all in every story. But work on them and see which ones work for you. Some of them might work in one story but not in another. So if you've got 3 or 4 different techniques, they're going to help. One of them I talked again, and this is on the storytelling handout that I've got, about using story elements. The first thing we all learn in this business is what? Help me out. Your first day, Journalism 101, or first day in a newsroom. What's the first thing you learned about this business?
Where the bathroom is.
What's the second thing? Okay. What's the first thing we all learned about journalism? That story needs to do. Yes?
W's.
Why, who, what, when, where, why, how. We all know that. And we all think in those terms. And that's a good way to come up with a lead sometimes too. Which of these W's is most important for this story? But a second technique that I use takes that, in one sense, one step further, but in one sense, one step back. Rather than going back to my first day in journalism and the 5 W's, I go back to like maybe 8th grade English, maybe for you it was 7th grade or 9th grade, depending on where you went to school or whatever. And that's when I learned the elements of a story. Plot, character, setting, theme, and climax, resolution. Those sorts of elements of the story help. They answer the 5 W's, but you answer why with Steve Buttry, 47, and Omaha journalism. But if you're developing character, it becomes Steve Buttry, an annoying Yankee fan. Steve Buttry, a father, a husband, cancer survivor, a writing coach, unpublished novelist. Any of those sorts of things that that tell you more about me than comma 47 comma an Omaha journalist. And so character demands a little more. Setting demands more than simply when or where. When or where can be a point on the clock or the calendar, a point on the map. But setting is a place in relation to other places, or a setting requires some description. Setting might be a time in relation to the events before and after it, those sorts of things. So that if you think in terms of what are the elements of my story, and then what is the most important element of my story, then you know where your lead is. We're going to start the lead with the most important element. Or maybe we're going to start the lead with two elements interacting, a character in a conflict. Those sorts of things. So decide which of the 5 W's is most important, decide which of the story elements is most important. Those sorts of things will help you decide your lead within this focus that you've been keeping during the reporting process. Another technique, and this goes back to the writing as you report. If you're writing as you report, you're not necessarily writing the lead each time you think you're writing the lead. You're almost auditioning leads. I'll come back from my first interview, and I might write like this is going to be the story. And I'll write a lead, and I'll think, oh, that's a pretty good lead, and I might polish it a little. And then I go out to the second interview for that story, and I come up with something much better. So I'm in the process of auditioning leads as I'm writing my story as I go along. And my story is not going to hurt by having all the polish that I put on that first lead down in the 7th paragraph, is it? I like to have that sort of polish all the way through the story. I mean, we think we put that much polish on every paragraph, but we don't. The lead gets the most attention. And it should get the most attention. I travel a lot in doing my coaching gigs. I went in June to Erie, Pennsylvania. Well, there are no direct flights from Omaha to Erie, I found out. And so I spent a lot of time that day in the airport. And I was watching people read the paper. And it was kind of my own unscientific version. Have you ever seen the video that API or somebody did where they got some sort of device that tracked exactly what people were doing, or what their eyes were on? And you don't need the device. You can just watch people. They're kind of scanning, and a headliner's picture catches their attention. Their eyes stop for maybe 3, 4, 5 seconds, and then they move on. And I think, God, was that my story? They stopped on for 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. But then you'll see they do stop sometime, and they'll stop for maybe a minute or so, and then turn the page and look, and they're not scanning this time. They're looking for the jump, and they stop. You got to get them in that 3, 4, or 5 seconds with the lead and with the few paragraphs that follow the lead, or it doesn't matter how good the rest of the story is. And it's a humbling thing to watch people read the newspaper. The readers are very demanding of us, and we need to be demanding of ourselves as we write the leads for them. Another thing in writing with the 5 W's is I kind of like to think of the secondary, I consider kind of secondary 5 W's. Not just who, what, when, where, why, or how, but kind of go into the secondary level. Why not? How much? What's next? Kind of think of other questions that are essential to a lot of stories, and see if your lead might rest in one of those. And then I think that a really important thing is recognizing that the lead doesn't have to have everything in it. You need to make some choices. One of the early writing coaches, I think it was Don Murray, but I think Roy Peter Clark, likened a lot of leads that you see in newspapers, and you see them still today, to a suitcase. That you're trying to cram everything into. This was back before the zipper-up suitcases. You're trying to cram everything into the suitcase, and you kind of sit down on it, or you can't latch it because you've got so much stuff crammed into it. And we treat our leads the same way sometimes. I want to think of a different metaphor for a lead. Instead of treating your lead like a suitcase, think of it as a G-string. Brief and enticing. Okay? Show a little faith that the reader's going to read the second paragraph. Save a little for the second paragraph to justify that faith. Okay? Now I want to tell you, this goes to the blank screen thing, and I'm going to set up our second video here. Chip Scanlon calls this process free writing. If you haven't seen that movie, it's a terrific movie. The first movie we saw, it's Finding Forrester. Sean Connery character is William Forrester. And what he was trying to get Jamal, who was the young writer that he was coaching, he was trying to get Jamal to do what Chip Scanlon calls free writing. And that is, you sit down and, for 30 seconds, a minute, 5 minutes, you don't let the keys stop. You're punching keys and writing whatever comes to your mind. Now what this is, part of this is trusting yourself. It's trusting your reporting, trusting that you've done enough, that you know what the story is. And if you just force yourself to write, it's going to come out. And we're going to do some free writing, so I want you to take some notes, because we're going to watch an event here. You're at this event covering a convention. That's not a convention. It's a merger announcement event in Las Vegas for a local Quad Cities business. And they're putting on this extravaganza to wine and dine everybody. And this happens as you're watching. I didn't have to say Las Vegas. This could have been just down the street, couldn't it?